Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive, this time on the Tirukkural, this ancient Tamil text that has been making waves with with the idea that it could be like a unifying force for all of India.
Wow.
We're going to be looking at excerpts from Thirukkural National Literature by S.N. Kandaswamy today to kind of break down how he makes that argument.
Yeah, that's a fascinating idea, right? Like, you have this text rooted in a specific region and language, and the author is saying that it could speak to an entire nation.
I know, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, how do you even begin to bridge that gap?
Right.
I'm really curious to see how he does that.
Yeah, so Kandaswamy kind of starts off by acknowledging that, India, despite its huge amount of diversity, has always sought out these unifying symbols. And it makes me think about things like Vande Mataram and Jana Gana Mana. Like, those were such clear attempts to, like, create a shared national identity.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where I think this idea of national literature really comes into play. He's suggesting that a really powerful work of literature can really capture the essence of a nation, like all of its values, its struggles, its aspirations. And by doing that, it can actually become a source of shared pride and understanding.
So is he saying that the Tirukural fits that bill?
Yeah.
Like, this is it?
That's exactly what he's arguing.
Wow.
It's a pretty surprising argument when you think about it.
Okay.
Because the Tirukkural, for those who might not be familiar with it, it's this ancient Tamil text. It's a collection of 130 couplets, and they're just packed with wisdom on everything from ethics to governance.
So, okay, I can already see why choosing the Tirukural for something like this might raise some eyebrows. Because it is rooted in a specific region and language. So how can it possibly speak to the whole of India?
Yeah, that is the challenge that Kandaswamy is taking on here. And he argues that the Tirukural's appeal goes way beyond, just its linguistic origins. In fact, he even compares it to the works of Confucius and Zoroaster and even the Bible.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty bold comparison. What's the connection there?
So I think by making these parallels, he's trying to highlight the universality of the Tirukural's message, like suggesting that even though there are these cultural differences, there are these fundamental human values that just transcend time and place. This search for wisdom and ethical guidance and just like principles to live by. These are things that we all grapple with no matter where we come from.
Yeah, no matter what walk of life you're from.
Perfect.
Okay, so it's about tapping into that shared human experience. Gotcha. So how does he actually define what a nation is?
Right. That's a great question.
Yeah.
So Kandaswamy, when he defines a notion, he really emphasizes these shared aspects like population and territory, government, language, culture. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on to stress the importance of common values and like a sense of shared identity.
Okay, so it's not just about living in the same geographical area. It's about feeling connected to the people around you. So how does the Tirukural address these ideas, like these ideas of shared values and identity?
Well, if you look closer at the text, you'll see that it actually delves into topics that are essential for any nation to thrive.
Yeah.
It talks about leadership qualities, principles of good governance, the importance of justice and social welfare. And these are all themes that resonate with the challenge of building a cohesive and prosperous nation, regardless of the specific time or place.
So is he suggesting that the Tirukural could be like a blueprint for how to build a better society? I mean, it is an ancient text, but are those ideas really still applicable today?
Right. That's where it gets really interesting. Kandaswamy argues that the Tirukural's wisdom isn't bound by time or region. He claims that its teachings are just as relevant today as they were centuries ago, and not just for India, but for the entire world.
Okay, that's a bold claim.
Yeah.
But I have to admit I'm intrigued. What are some of the specific things that he thinks make it so universally applicable?
So he specifically points to the text focus on humanism. It explicitly rejects discrimination based on birth or belief, which really aligns with our modern values of inclusivity and equality.
Okay, yeah, no, that's something I can definitely get behind. Sounds like he's building a strong case here for how the Tirukural can unite people. But how does he connect this to the actual content of the text itself?
So he goes on to provide some concrete examples from the Tirukkural to illustrate this universal appeal. He highlights its emphasis on things like honesty and compassion and nonviolence, those fundamental virtues that underpin any harmonious society.
Yeah.
You need those, no matter what.
Those are like the building blocks.
Exactly.
Yep.
So he's showing how the Tirukkural's teachings can actually translate into real-world actions and behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's not just about individual ethics either. The Tirukkural also offers valuable insights into wise leadership, having a strong ethical cabinet, and the government's role in ensuring justice for all citizens
It's like he's saying that this text, written centuries ago, can actually provide guidance for building a better world today.
That's the core of his argument. He even highlights how the Tirukkural tackles issues like poverty and the well-being of all citizens, which are central to our modern concept of a welfare state.
Wow. I'm really starting to see the potential here. But I have to wonder, is this just a theoretical argument? Like, can these ancient teachings really be put into practice in all the complexities of today's world?
Yeah, and that's the question that lies at the heart of this whole deep dive. Kandaswamy is challenging us to consider the Tirukkural not just as a historical text, but as a living source of wisdom that can guide us toward a more just and harmonious future.
This is already more thought-provoking than I expected. I'm really eager to hear more about how he backs up this claim. Okay, so we've talked about how Kandaswamy sees this really special potential in the Tirukural, but I mean, he's making a pretty bold claim. How does he see this ancient text actually speaking to people from all walks of life in India?
He addresses that head on. And he points out that for the Tirukkural to really resonate as like national literature, it needs to be embraced by people from all different backgrounds, all different regions, all different perspectives.
Yeah, it can't just be like something that scholars study or something that's confined to one specific region that needs to have a broader appeal.
Right, exactly. So Kandaswamy uses this really interesting analogy to illustrate his point.
Okay.
He talks about how India, after gaining independence, actively sought out these common national symbols. And they didn't necessarily try to invent these symbols from scratch. They looked for things that already held meaning for a large part of the population.
Like the national flag.
Exactly.
The national anthem. The national bird.
Yeah.
These symbols that evoke a sense of shared identity.
Exactly.
Because they tap into existing emotions and associations.
Yeah, precisely. And so Kandaswamy argues that the Tirukkural actually has the potential to function in the same way. He emphasizes that its wisdom isn't tied to any specific religion or political ideology, but rather focuses on these timeless principles that can resonate with anyone who is seeking to live a virtuous life.
So it's not about imposing a belief system, but more about offering a set of values that can guide people from all walks of life.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction.
Okay.
And to further kind of strengthen his point, he highlights the fact that the Tirukkural has already been translated into numerous languages, and it's actually studied by people all over the world.
Wow.
Which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And this widespread appeal, he argues, is a testament to its inherent universality.
So it's not about being Tamil or Indian, but about something even more fundamental, being human.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how he's building this bridge between this ancient text and the complexities of a modern nation.
Yeah, and this actually leads to a really fascinating point that Kandaswamy raises, and that's this whole concept of nationalism itself. Okay. He argues that nationalism, when it's properly understood, can be a really powerful force for good.
That's an interesting take, especially in today's world where nationalism often has these negative connotations. So how does he unpack that?
Yeah, he is very careful to distinguish between a narrow, exclusionary form of nationalism and a broader, more inclusive one.
Okay.
And he believes that the Tirukkural actually aligns with this latter vision.
So how does he define this more inclusive nationalism? Like, what does that look like in practice?
So he actually brings in a quote from the philosopher John Stuart Mill,
Yeah.
who defined nationality as being grounded in, things like a shared territory, language, and culture. But Mill also stresses something really crucial, the importance of a shared sense of sympathy and cooperation among citizens.
It's not just about living in the same place or speaking the same language, but about feeling connected to your fellow citizens and working together toward a common good.
Exactly. And Kandaswamy argues that the ethical teachings within the Tirukkural actually promote this kind of unity. It emphasizes compassion, empathy, and a sense of responsibility towards others.
Right, so these qualities that foster social cohesion rather than division.
Exactly.
Okay, so he's making this case for how these individualistic virtues can actually contribute to the well-being of society. So how does he tie this back to the Tirukkural?
Yeah, so he does that by delving deeper into the text's universal themes, highlighting how it addresses various aspects of life, from personal ethics to governance and social welfare.
Okay, so what are some of the key areas he focuses on?
Well, he starts by pointing out how the Tirukkural emphasizes these virtues like honesty, truthfulness, and nonviolence. And these are qualities that are essential for building trust and harmony within a community.
Yeah, you can't really argue with that. Honesty and nonviolence, those are pretty essential for a stable and just society.
Right, exactly. And he doesn't just stop there. He also highlights the text's focus on good governance, emphasizing how it provides insights into wise leadership, the importance of having a strong and ethical cabinet, and the government's role in ensuring justice and fairness for all citizens.
So he's connecting these ancient teachings to the very practical challenges of running a country.
Yeah.
It's like he's presenting the Tirukural as a guide for both individual conduct and responsible leadership.
Yes, and it goes even further. He draws attention to how the text delves into this concept of Trivarga, which is a Sanskrit term that refers to the three pursuits of life: Dharma, Artha, and Kama.
Dharma, Artha, and Kama.
Yes.
So it's not just about being morally upright, it's about recognizing that people have both material and spiritual needs.
Precisely. And the Tirukural's approach isn't about asceticism or denying worldly pleasures. It advocates for a life of moderation and virtue, where material prosperity is seen as a means to live a fulfilling and meaningful life.
So it's about finding that balance between personal ambition and the well-being of society. That's a pretty delicate balance to achieve. How does the Tirukural suggest we go about finding that equilibrium?
So Kandaswamy argues that the key lies in recognizing what he calls the interconnectedness of individual actions and societal well-being.
Interconnectedness.
Yes.
So it's like the idea that our own well-being is intertwined with the well-being of those around us.
Exactly.
Kind of like no man is an island. We can't truly thrive unless we're contributing to the community.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And Kandaswamy believes that this principle of interconnectedness is really what allows a nation to truly flourish. You know, it enables people from diverse backgrounds to come together, to build a society that is both just and prosperous.
So he's saying that by living by the ethical principles of the Tirukural, we're not just improving our own lives, but we're contributing to the strength and harmony of the nation as a whole.
Exactly.
Now, that's pretty powerful.
It is. It's a very fascinating argument. He's presenting this vision where individual actions aren't isolated, but rather they ripple outward, influencing the well-being of the entire community.
But I mean,
Yeah.
we can't just overlook the fact that this text was written centuries ago.
Right.
So how does he address the potential criticisms that might come up about that?
Yeah. So he anticipates this very critique.
Yeah.
And he argues that while the context in which the Tirukkural was written may have changed, you know, the fundamental principles of human nature have remained remarkably consistent. So Tirukkural's teachings on honesty, compassion, and justice, those are timeless in their essence.
So he's acknowledging that the world has evolved, but he's arguing that those core values necessary for a thriving society remain constant.
Right.
Okay, I'm finding his argument pretty persuasive so far.
It's definitely thought-provoking. And to further address those potential criticisms, he delves into one of the most compelling aspects of the Tirukkural, and that's its inherent humanism.
Okay.
He points out that the text explicitly rejects discrimination based on, birth, social status, or religious beliefs.
Wow, that's pretty striking, especially considering the historical context in which it was written. So even in ancient times, there was a recognition of the inherent worth and dignity of every person,
Yeah.
regardless of their background.
And Kandaswamy argues that this message of humanism is incredibly relevant today, especially, in a world that's often plagued by divisive forces like prejudice and discrimination.
Right. So the Tirukural offers like an antidote to those forces.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how else does he bolster his argument for the text's lasting relevance?
He actually brings in voices from across history and cultures who have recognized the profound wisdom contained in the Tirukkural. For example, he mentions Max Miller, who is a renowned ensiologist, and he studied comparative religion and literature, and he recognized the text's universal appeal.
So it's not just resonating within India, but also with thinkers around the world.
Exactly. And he even quotes Parmelikar, who is a prominent commentator on the Tirukkural, who argued that the text's teachings are actually consistent with ethical principles found in various philosophical and religious traditions worldwide.
So he's showing that despite differences in language, culture, and religious beliefs, there are these fundamental ethical principles that resonate across humanity. And the Tirukkural is a text that embodies this shared heritage.
Exactly.
That's amazing. But, I mean, even if we accept all that,
Yeah.
the timeless wisdom, the universal appeal, how do we actually elevate it to the status of national literature? Like, how do we make sure this isn't just a nice idea, but that it's actually a lived reality?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Kandaswamy has made a really compelling case so far. But the path from potential to realization, that's often a really challenging one.
Definitely.
And that's actually what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll delve into those practical considerations, the potential obstacles, and ultimately whether the Tirukural's wisdom can truly be applied to the complexities of modern India.
All right, so we've explored Kandaswamy's argument for the Tirukural's universality and its potential to be like this unifying force in India. But I think the question that everyone's probably thinking is, how do we actually put this into practice?
Right, how do we get from potential to reality?
Yeah, is this just a nice idea or can it actually be done?
That's the big question, and Kandaswamy really tackles it head on. He really dives right into the practical challenges of actually making the Tirukkural national literature.
Okay, so what are some of those challenges?
Well, one of the most obvious ones, and he acknowledges this right away, is the language barrier.
Of course.
You know, the Tirukkural, it's been translated into a lot of languages, but it was originally written in Tamil, which is a major language in India, but it's not spoken by everyone.
Right, so if you want to create this sense of national unity, you can't have a big part of the population feeling left out because they can't even understand the language.
Exactly. So Kandaswamy proposes this kind of two-pronged approach to address this issue. First, he says you need to make sure translations are widely available.
Makes sense.
So making the Tirukkural accessible in all of India's major languages, that's a critical step.
But even if you have all these translations, how do you get people to actually want to engage with the text? To see how it's relevant to their lives?
Right. That's where his second point comes in. He's a big advocate for creating educational initiatives that focus on the Tirukkural. So incorporating it into school curriculums, bringing it into public discourse, even using it in cultural programs.
It's making the text accessible through a lot of different channels.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. So you've got the language barrier. But even then, I imagine people might think, the Tirukural is just too idealistic.
Right. And that's another key challenge that Kandaswamy brings up. You know, some people might say that in today's world, with all of its complexities and its conflicts, that the Tirukural's emphasis on things like honesty and compassion and nonviolence is just unrealistic.
Yeah, I can see people saying that those values are naive, that they're outdated.
Right.
So how does Kandaswamy respond to that?
He emphasizes that the Tirukkural isn't meant to be this rigid set of rules or some kind of utopian vision that's impossible to achieve. Rather, he sees it as a guide, a source of inspiration that points us in the right direction.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about just striving to be better.
Exactly.
As individuals and as a society.
And he reminds us that even if we fall short of these really lofty ideals, the very act of striving has value in itself.
I like that.
You know, it elevates our actions, our choices. It encourages us to be better people and better citizens.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. It's recognizing that we all have the capacity to be better, and that striving for those virtues, even in small ways, can actually make a difference.
So it's about personal transformation as much as it is about societal change.
Right.
It all starts with individuals embracing these ethical principles and actually trying to apply them in their everyday lives.
Yeah, it makes it feel much more attainable. It's not about this grand sweeping revolution. It's about making those conscious choices in our everyday interactions.
You get a little bit kinder, a little bit more honest.
Exactly.
A little bit more compassionate.
And Kandaswamy argues that all of these small acts of virtue, when they're multiplied across an entire nation, they can create this powerful ripple effect, leading to a more just and compassionate society.
It's like the butterfly effect. One small change in one place can have a huge impact somewhere else.
Exactly.
So it's about individual responsibility, but also about collective action. Our choices matter.
Right.
And those choices can contribute to this larger wave of positive change.
And that's why Kandaswamy really frames the Tirukkural as this call to action. He's urging each of us to embody the change that we want to see. You know, reminding us that we all have a role to play in creating a better future.
I love that. But how do we know if this is anything more than just wishful thinking? Like, how do we measure the impact of all these efforts?
Well, Kandaswamy doesn't give us any, easy answers or metrics or anything like that. He challenges us to think about the legacy that we want to leave behind. He asks us to consider whether we want to be part of a society that's driven by self-interest or one that's guided by principles of justice, compassion, and shared responsibility.
It's a deep question. He's not just talking about national identity. He's talking about what it means to be human.
Exactly.
Wow.
He's asking us to reflect on a kind of world that we want to create, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. And he suggests that the Tirukural, with its timeless wisdom, offers a roadmap.
So he leaves us with that thought-provoking question. Can an ancient text like the Tirukkural truly speak to the complexities of modern nationhood?
Right. I think this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about.
For sure.
And maybe the answer isn't about whether the Tirukkural perfectly reflects our modern world, but rather whether it can inspire us to strive for something better.
It's about sparking a dialogue, encouraging people to reflect, and igniting this collective effort to actually live up to the ideals it talks about.
So we encourage you, dear listener, to explore the Tirukkural for yourself. See if its wisdom speaks to you. See if it can offer you some insights into navigating your own life and the challenges we all face as a society. You might just be surprised by how much this ancient text has to offer our modern world.